Well, hey guys, I've realized that as many times as I've shown you this fountain in Memorial Park in Memphis, Tennessee, that I've never let you hear that water run. I hope you enjoyed that, and we're back one more time to visit the grave and pay our respects to one of my heroes in pop music, Bob Welch. Bob Welch was born on August 31st, 1945 in Hollywood, California. His was a show business family. His dad, Robert Welch Sr., was a producer and screenwriter at Paramount. He produced films with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby. He also produced the 25th Annual Academy Awards TV special and the Thin Man TV series. Bob's mother was Templeton Fox, who was a singer and an actress, working with Orson Welles' Mercury Theater in Chicago and doing several TV movies. Bob was an entertainer just like his parents. He was a musician, a guitar player, a member of the group Fleetwood Mac from 71 to 74. He also had a successful solo career that we'll talk more about in a bit. As a child, Bob learned to play the clarinet, and he switched to guitar in his early teens. He was most interested in rhythm and blues and jazz and rock and roll. After high school, Bob enrolled at the Sorbonne in Paris, but during one interview he said he mostly smoked hash with bearded guys that were 5 years older than him. He returned to L.A. and the University of California, but did not complete a degree. In 1964, he joined a group called the Seven Souls as their guitarist. The Seven Souls lost a Battle of the Bands competition, with the first place prize being a recording contract with Epic Records. Well, they lost that competition to Sly and the Family Stone. The Seven Souls did some recording and were marginally successful, but broke up in 1969. Bob went back to Paris and started a trio called Head West, which was not successful. And he has said that during this time he was living in Paris on rice and beans and sleeping on the floor. In 1971, Bob auditioned for Fleetwood Mac at Benefold, their retreat in England. The band was looking for a guitarist, and their part-time secretary happened to be a high school friend of Bob's. Fleetwood Mac met with Bob a couple times, and they decided to hire him, making him their rhythm guitarist. Welch lived with the band in their communal home in Hampshire. During this time, the band hired equipment from the Rolling Stones, and they recorded enough material for 3 albums. The albums were Bare Trees, Penguin, and Mystery to Me. Future Games was recorded in London, and it was the first album with Welch and Christine McVie. The album Bare Trees featured Welch's song Sentimental Lady. This song became an incredible hit for Welch 5 years later in his solo album French Kiss. Christine McVie and Lindsey Buckingham also sang and produced the remake. About this time, Fleetwood Mac started constantly changing band members around Mick Fleetwood, the McVies, and of course Bob Welch. By 1973, all the stress brought on by the changing band members and all the touring, and of course the breakup of the McVies' marriage and trouble in the Fleetwoods' marriage, the band quit a tour of the U.S., and its manager refused to cancel the remaining 26 dates on the tour. He essentially tried to fire all the musicians in Fleetwood Mac and rehire some of them and complete the tour. Welch and the others ignored their manager, and he set up the rest of the tour with a new group of musicians, and they were called the New Fleetwood Mac. Of course, the original Fleetwood Mac members got an injunction, and they prevented the fake Mac from touring under their name. Their manager also got his injunction that prevented the original band from touring. All the lawsuits and legal wrangling put Fleetwood Mac out of business for almost a year. During this time, Bob Welch stayed in Los Angeles, and he convinced the band to move to L.A., where they decided to manage themselves. They called their company CD Management. In 1974, Bob was the only guitar player in the band. and they released Heroes Are Hard to Find. It peaked at number 34 on Billboard. Welch began suffering, and his marriage was failing, and he thought he had exhausted his creativity with the band. Welch quit Fleetwood Mac in December of '74 and was replaced by Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. Welch maintained a good relationship with his former band members, and during the height of their popularity in the late '70s, many times he would open for Fleetwood Mac and he would sit in as lead vocalist on Hypnotized. Mick Fleetwood even managed Welch's career into the '80s. By 1994, Welch sued Fleetwood Mac for breach of contract and underpayment of royalties. The lawsuit was settled in '96. When Fleetwood Mac was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in '98, the original band members were named to the hall, as were some of the later additions, but Welch was not. Kind of ironic, since Mick Fleetwood dedicated a whole chapter of his biography to Welch's era in the band and credited Bob with saving Fleetwood Mac. Let's back up just a bit. In '77, Welch released his first solo album, French Kiss. As we said earlier, it had contributions from Fleetwood, Christine McVie, and Lindsey Buckingham. This was a platinum album, and it peaked number 12 on the Billboard chart. For me, it was the highlight of Bob's career, with Sentimental Lady, of course, and Ebony Eyes, and Hot Love in a Cold World. Bob created music after that, but for me, nothing quite reached the status of French Kiss. Following the release of his album Eye Contact, he started partying with Guns N' Roses and became addicted to cocaine and heroin. During that era, Welch said he was a very bad boy, very decadent, cynical, and very stoned. The day he was released from detox, he was introduced to a girl named Wendy Armistead. They were married in December of '85 and moved to Phoenix, Arizona. Welch stayed sober for the rest of his life. Welch and Armistead later moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and remained married for the rest of his life. In March of 2012, Bob underwent spinal surgery, but it was unsuccessful and he was still in lots of pain. In spite of taking potent pain medication, he still couldn't find any relief. Finally, on June 7, 2012, around 6 a.m., he shot himself. He left his wife Wendy a 9-page suicide note love letter. He was 66 years old. Wendy died in November of 2016 from COPD. She was also 66.